Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Right now the world is on edge because of something that just might be a turning point. Putin issues a nuclear threat. Is this the final warning? In this video we're peeling back the layers of what that threat really means, what's changed, what might happen next, and whether we're looking at brinkmanship or full escalation. To start, Putin has recently made statements and enacted changes that show Russia is lowering the barrier for nuclear weapon use. He's updated the Russian nuclear doctrine. Now, in some circumstances, even a conventional attack, if supported by a nuclear power or involving mass missile or aerial assault, can trigger a nuclear response. Eurasia Review +4, CNBC +4, Al Arabiya English +4. He's also warned that attacks on Russian ally Belarus could be counted as attacks on Russia itself, making the scope of possible retaliation broader. Al Arabiya English +2, CNBC +2. So what has changed compared to before? Under the older doctrine, nuclear weapons could be used if Russia was hit with a nuclear attack, or if its very existence was threatened in a broadly defined conventional war. Al Arabiya English +3, Eurasia Review +3, Dawn +3. The revised version adds new triggers: any massive air assault, cruise missile attack, or drone offensive, any conventional aggression on part of a non-nuclear state that is backed by a nuclear one, or threats to territorial integrity or sovereignty, even before total collapse of state power. Dawn +4, CNBC +4, CNN +4. That means what used to be theoretically safe or below the threshold might now carry higher risk. Putin has also emphasized that Russia has enough strength and means to respond. While claiming that nuclear weapons are a deterrent, he's made it clear that deterrence alone may not be sufficient if he believes vital national security is under serious conventional threat. The Sun +2, Al Jazeera +2. This isn't just about bluster. There are real policy documents and revised doctrine texts underpinning these rhetoric shifts. CNBC +1 now. This raises big questions. Is this the final warning? Or is it a strategic signal designed to shape behavior of adversaries, especially the West, NATO, and Ukraine? One possibility is that this is part of a coercive signaling strategy. Putin and the Kremlin may be testing how far they can push conventional aggression without provoking a full-blown response. By lowering thresholds and expanding the definitions of what counts as aggression, they increase uncertainty. Opponents are forced to second-guess what counts as supporting an attack. What kind of strikes will provoke retaliation? The ambiguity works in Russia's favor. Eurasia Review +2, CNN +2. It's a tactic seen often in strategic deterrence to deter escalation by making opponents fear missteps. Another possibility is that these threats are designed to influence Western policy, for example, to discourage countries from supplying long-range missiles, drones, or aerial assets to Ukraine. If Western states believe that providing certain weapons or approving certain operations will provoke a nuclear-style threat, they may hold back. That gives Russia diplomatic leverage. CNBC +3, Al Arabiya English +3, CNN +3 also. This might be aimed internally to bolster domestic support, project strength, show that the leadership is not weak. When a state is under pressure, practically, economically, militarily, projecting strength becomes a tool of governance. If the war isn't going according to plan, or if there are problems with international sanctions or economic fallout, strong rhetoric helps manage perceptions at home. Eurasia Review +1, but there are risks. Let's talk about what could go wrong. First, miscalculation. Because the doctrine is more vague now, things that one side believes are below the threshold might be seen by Russia as triggering aggression. An air strike, a drone attack, or even a delivery of missiles, if backed by a nuclear power, might be interpreted by Moscow as justification for nuclear retaliation. That could lead to escalation faster than many expect. Second, crisis instability. When others see that the threshold for nuclear response is lowered, they might respond faster, preemptively, or overreact. NATO or Western states might feel cornered, feel they need to assure deterrence, possibly increase deployment, or change policy in ways that raise the stakes. What is intended as deterrence can spiral into provocation. Third, arms race and posture changes. If one side changes doctrine or readiness, opponents might respond by boosting their own readiness, deploying new systems, modernizing nuclear triads, resuming tests, or expanding missile defense systems. That leads to destabilization, higher costs, more tension, more chances for accidents. Fourth, diplomatic fallout. Threatening nuclear use is seen by many countries as beyond mere politics, it's existential. There may be condemnation, sanctions, diplomatic isolation. Russia's relationships may suffer. Conversely, any move toward nuclear use, even rhetorical, can damage trust, treaties, non-proliferation regimes. Let's examine what the world reaction has been so far and how other actors are behaving. Western countries have mostly condemned the doctrine changes. NATO has expressed concern about lowering thresholds and so on. They see this as escalatory and dangerous, but they are also cautious because responding too aggressively might validate the threat. The West has to balance deterrence and de-escalation. CNN +2 Eurasia Review +2 Ukraine has been trying to get long-range systems, missiles, and support, and these doctrine changes by Russia might be specifically aimed at interfering with that, pushing Western countries to hesitate. If Ukraine receives certain weapons or strikes deeper inside Russia, Moscow could claim those are triggers, so Ukraine's strategy becomes riskier. CNN +2 Don +2 Belarus is now more explicitly included in Russia's deterrence umbrella. That means attacks on Belarus or from Belarus could be claimed by Moscow as attacks on Russia itself. That expands the geographic and strategic scope. Also, putting missiles or nuclear weapons or potential warheads in Allied territory increases complexity of any response. Don +1 Let's talk about what might trigger this final warning becoming real. One trigger could be if Ukraine carries out or is permitted to carry out deep strikes into Russian territory using Western weapons, especially long-range missiles or drones. If those strikes are successful and damage key infrastructure, air defense, or logistics, Russia might claim that such attacks cross the new thresholds. CNBC +2 CNN +2 Another trigger could be if NATO directly or visibly increases its involvement. For example, through deploying troops, launching strikes on behalf of Ukraine, or allowing Ukraine to stage from NATO territory. That could be seen as external intervention by a nuclear power, potentially activating the joint attack clause in the new doctrine. CNBC +1 A third trigger might be a provocation or misstep, for instance, an unintentional strike or an attack that was misattributed. In times of tension, intelligence gets messy, misinformation, fog of war make mistakes more likely. One wrong move could be interpreted as aggression, leading to escalation. Fourth, Russia may use proxy fronts or asymmetric warfare. If Ukraine or its allies act through third parties, or if there are missile or drone launches from areas not officially under state control, but associated with them, Russia could claim support by nuclear powers or that aggression is taking place. This expands Russia's justification in its own eyes. Now, is this really the final warning? Probably not, at least not yet. There are indicators that Russia is pushing the envelope. The doctrine change is real. The rhetoric is louder, but countries rarely move to nuclear war as a first step because the costs, economic, diplomatic, human, are so enormous. The more likely scenario is that these warnings serve as strategic leverage to shape the behavior of Ukraine, NATO, Western military planners, and diplomatic processes. Let's explore what possible outcomes might be under this scenario. Scenario 1. Maintain deterrence and limited conventional conflict. Russia continues conventional attacks, missiles, drones, artillery. Ukraine receives support, but both sides avoid triggers that could invoke the nuclear doctrine. There may be more tense posturing, but no explicit nuclear use. Scenario 2. Escalation via proxy or drones. More drone strikes, aerial attacks deeper in Russian territory, possibly cross-border incidents. Russia responds more aggressively, possibly with large conventional airstrikes, counter, drone systems, or even missile barrages aimed at showing capability. Warnings become more frequent, readiness higher. Scenario 3. Crisis front line miscalculation. One incident drone, missile, misunderstanding, accident becomes interpreted under new thresholds as aggression. Russia claims the right to respond under the revised doctrine. This could involve either tactical nuclear weapons or threats thereof, or even tests. Even just nuclear drills could be used for show of force. Scenario 4 is severe escalation. Adversaries perceive heightened risk and may respond with military buildup, deployment of additional forces or missile defenses. This reframes global geopolitics, increased risk of confrontation between nuclear powers, potential involvement of alliances, diplomatic breakdown, treaty erosion. Worst case, real use of tactical nuclear weapons on limited scale, but that would open catastrophic consequences. Scenario 5. De-escalation or rollback. If Western powers push for diplomacy, mediation, perhaps pressure or dialogue that makes clear the cost of further escalation is too high, possibly with confidence, building measures, or agreements that limit the use of certain weapons, create buffer zones, or revise operational policies to reduce risk. Sometimes threats work as bargaining tools. What should other players do in such environment? They must prepare. That means sharpening intelligence, improving missile defense, deepening alliances, clarifying red lines, communicating clearly. The West must avoid accidental escalation, ensure transparency, but also not appear weak in deterrence. Ukraine must weigh risks of deeper strikes against the consequences of provoking nuclear response. NATO might need to review force postures, increase readiness and resilience in related regions. Public perception also matters. When people hear nuclear threat or final warning, panic can spread. Leaders often use this rhetoric for domestic audiences too, to unify, to intimidate, to shape narratives of existential threat. Watching media coverage critically is important. What is the actual policy vs. what is rhetoric? Is there internal debate inside Russia? What are experts saying independently? In conclusion, yes, Putin's threat may be closer than before to crossing thresholds that were historically more rigid. The revised doctrine, new definitions of aggression, inclusion of non-nuclear provocations, and expanded geographic scope make things more dangerous. But final warning doesn't necessarily mean a nuclear strike is imminent. Rather, it means we are in a more fragile, more ambiguous, more dangerous phase of deterrence. Whether this warning becomes the last before escalation depends on decisions made by multiple actors: Russia, Ukraine, NATO, and the broader international community. What is certain is that the world can no longer take previous rules of escalation for granted. The question is not whether nuclear war is impossible anymore, it's how close it might be, and whether mutual restraint, diplomacy, and clear communication can hold things back from crossing that line. Let me know what you think. Has the final warning really been given, or is it just another round of strategic theater? Could this doctrine change force the West or you, Ukraine to rethink their support and engagements. Drop your thoughts and comments. If this video added perspective, hit like, share, and subscribe. Stay safe, stay informed.